Breaking news into CBS Sports HQ. Multiple reports say Drew Brees will miss about 6 weeks. The Saints quarterback tore ligaments in his thumb during their loss to the Rams on Sunday. Those torn ligaments will require surgery. They are still determining who will do the surgery. It could happen as soon as today. His return will be determined after that operation. New Orleans fell to 1-1 with their Week 2 loss in LA, and we're taking a look at the impact of Drew Brees' injury. According to Sportsline, and believe it or not, Sportsline thinks only about 1 win difference from 10.9 after Week 2, and then Brees out 6 weeks, 9.9. So we'll see what actually happens on the field. Again, Drew Brees to miss approximately 6 weeks after torn ligaments in his thumb. All right, let's bring in our NFL insider, Jason La Canfora, now with more. Jason, what can you tell us about this situation with Drew Brees?
Yeah, I mean, that is his plan from what I'm told, from someone close to him, that at this point, based on the medical feedback he's received, that there really isn't a viable alternative to the surgery. Now, I've also reached out to several people in the Saints organization who would not confirm the surgery or the timetable. So it could be that they haven't had a chance to talk to Brees themselves yet, or their doctors don't have all the information back. I'm not sure where things stand exactly in terms of that, but I will point out that the team declined to confirm that that is the definitive timeline. But again, through someone close to Brees, I'm hearing that's the feedback he received. That's the plan that the specialist in LA recommended.
All right, so we do know he's seen a specialist. We do know he's got ligaments torn in his thumb. Not sure about the timeline. What do we know about the plan at quarterback? Obviously, yesterday, Teddy Bridgewater came in, didn't look great. They've got Taysom Hill, maybe even another veteran out there who they could pick up.
Well, look, they made it a priority to keep Teddy Bridgewater. They made it a priority to acquire Teddy Bridgewater a year ago and pay a decent draft price to do so. From the Jets, because they viewed him as a guy who, if Drew Brees went down for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, could stem the tide and salvage their season. That, they didn't want to go to somebody completely unproven who, if we go 1-5 and then Drew comes back, we're never going to be able to get out of that hole. So they have a lot of faith in him. He's been around there for a long time. He's a beloved person in that organization. People naturally gravitate to him. He has a lot of great leadership skills. He has not played much football for, the better part of 3 or 4 years now. After the horrific injury that ended his Vikings career. So how's that going to look day to day, week to week? I don't know that anybody knows for sure. You mentioned Taysom Hill, and he's a guy who some complain that he's on the field too much, moving Brees out of the pocket to run the offense. Will they do a little bit more gadgetry? Sure. Sean Payton, their head coach, is one of the more influential and one of the brightest offensive minds in football. So I'm sure there's different ways to address that. Could be direct snaps to Alvin Kamara at times. I wouldn't rule anything out, but Teddy Bridgewater is going to have to be a guy who manages the game for them, who protects the football, and that's a very good roster, gives them a chance to win games. They have a great kicker, so nobody's running around in New Orleans like the sky is falling. But yeah, they're going to probably need a little bit more out of Teddy Bridgewater than what they got coming in cold off the sidelines yesterday out in L.A. Could they add a depth quarterback, a third guy, a practice squad developmental type guy? Yeah, that's possible. But Teddy Bridgewater is there for precisely this reason.
So Drew Brees, 40 years old. What do we know about the short-term future for Brees, even before this injury? They're trying to get back to the Super Bowl. Back-to-back years have ended in heartbreak. What do we know about sort of the short-term future there for Brees in New Orleans?
Well, I mean, look, his latest contract is essentially year to year, and he's been going year to year for a while now. They've had the franchise tag. I mean, he's a guy who is at a place in his life and a place in his career where no matter how any season ends, and obviously last year's ended in about as devastating fashion as it could for the Saints, he's going to get together with his family and then, see where his heart is. I know he talked a lot this preseason about thinking he had more years, plural, in the tank. And that, he didn't necessarily think that it had to be a one and done. He loves to play football. He loves being in a locker room setting. And he clearly loves New Orleans in particular. That's become a second home for him. So I don't think this changes his, sort of worldview on football one way or the other. It's an injury that, again, if everything goes according to at least what he's been told at this point, he's back for the stretch run, likely after that Week 9 bye. And then he'll reassess with his family. I think the thing that I would keep an eye on more than even this is just when he does come back, how often are they pumping the ball downfield? Is he really pushing it? Is he using all quadrants of the field, or is there still a little bit more conservative approach being taken? Because you watched in the second half last year, and obviously a very brief sample size this year, just one full game and then, a little bit of week 2. But that they hadn't seemed to have that downfield thrust like in the past. And eventually guys do lose arm strength. And he's not one of these 6'4" strapping guys to begin with. So, that's something that, assuming he comes back for the final, 6-7 weeks of the season, that I'll certainly be keeping an eye on. Probably even more so than the thumb.
Yeah, well, for now, we do know he will miss game time, expected to undergo surgery on that thumb as soon as today. That's our Jason Lockenfor with the latest. All right, let's bring in now senior NFL writer Pete Prisco for more. So, Pete, you just heard JLC, not too sure on the timeline, but what's your reaction for the Saints missing Drew Brees for approximately 6 weeks, maybe more?
It's a damning blow. I mean, obviously, when you lose a quarterback of that stature, you're going to have problems. And Teddy Bridgewater was signed and with the idea that he could fill in for a game or two, but 6 games is a long time for Teddy Bridgewater. I expect him to play well. This is sort of an audition for him. Remember, this is a guy who could have went to Miami and chose not to come back to New Orleans, and now he gets an opportunity to play. But as far as the New Orleans Saints go, you look at that schedule over the next couple weeks, it's brutal starting this week at Seattle.
It is. They've got a bye in Week 9, and if that 6-week timetable held up, then Week 10, Brees would be back against Atlanta. What do you make of this schedule in terms of a record with Teddy Bridgewater in at quarterback? I know he just came in relief, but still it was just the 4th time in the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era that the Saints were held without an offensive touchdown yesterday in L.A.
Well, if he can get 3 wins out of this, then I think they'd be happy with that. Ideally, you'd like to get 4, but if they can get 3 and kind of steady the boat while Drew Brees is out, they'll be thrilled with that. But it's going to be a tough task. Look, I love Teddy Bridgewater. The guy's a great kid. He's done everything to get back to this level, but he isn't Drew Brees, and we know that. But if he can come, close to what he was before in Minnesota, before he got hurt, then I think they can get 3 of these wins. If not, they get to 2-4, they're in a big hole.
More reports are coming out right now, Pete, that the IR maybe looks like more of an option there for Brees. 6 to 8 weeks, and of course, if he goes on IR, that would be 8 weeks. The advantage of IR is it opens up a roster spot for them. What do you think they could do or should do with an extra spot on the roster here?
Well, they'll have to bring in another quarterback, I would assume. But, here's the other thing. They love Taysom Hill. I've had many a conversation with Sean Brees with Sean Payton where he's raved about Taysom Hill. I'm not convinced he can be the starting quarterback, but they love him. They think he can step in and become a quarterback for them in the short term. I have to see it to believe it, but they do like him. But for now, it's Teddy Bridgewater. If he struggles, don't be shocked to see them turn to Taysom Hill.
All right, and finally, how do you handicap the NFC South? Obviously, injury is a big concern pretty much all across that division.
Well, it opens it wide open. I mean, think about this now. You have Atlanta, who barely won last night, but had to find a way late to do it. That saved their early part of their season at 1-1. The Bucs are 1-1. Carolina looks very much a disaster with what's going on with Cam Newton. So for me, it's wide open. If the Saints can get 3 of these victories or 4 of these victories, if Drew Brees is out, they can kind of manage the division and stay in the race. If they're 2-4 or 2-5, if he misses 7 games, then they have big problems. I think the Falcons were the best team going in. I still think they'll win the division.
All right, that's our Pete Prisco giving the Falcons the edge, especially now after the news that Drew Brees out with a thumb injury. All right, when we come back, we will get the fantasy impact and more of a quarterback's perspective on the news today that Drew Brees to have surgery after he tore ligaments on his thumb in Week 2. Breaking news into CBS Sports HQ. Multiple reports say Drew Brees will miss about 6 weeks. He tore ligaments in his thumb on this play here. His thumb colliding with that of Aaron Donald. His palm, really. The torn ligaments will require surgery. New Orleans fell to 1-1 in the loss. All right, and with that, we will bring in former NFL quarterback Danny Kanell and our fantasy expert Jamie Eisenberg. Danny, when you hear torn ligaments in the thumb near throwing hand, what does that mean for a quarterback?
I mean, that's as concerning as it gets when you think about the grip on the football, the pressure that you're going to have to put on the football, the various, all these pressure points that are on a football at once, they're going to impact everything you do. When you're talking about one of the most accurate passers in the history of his game, who makes his living, not off having a cannon, but putting the ball into tight windows, putting it exactly where he wants to, that has me concerned. Yes, all right, the timeline of when he comes back, but when he comes back, is it 100%? Can he throw with the exact same pinpoint accuracy that he's been able to do throughout his career? So I think this is a major cause for concern for the Saints.
It's funny because JLC brought up the deep ball as a concern. You're saying the limitations could even go into accuracy.
By far. That to me would be the biggest concern. Drew Brees has never been known for having a cannon. Not a guy like Patrick Mahomes who can throw it 80 yards in the air. It's about anticipation and it's about accuracy. Knowledge of the system, he's got all that. But when you're used to being able to throw, when you're talking about windows, about the definition of open, Drew Brees' definition of open is different than most quarterbacks. It's just, I need just a sliver of a window and I can fit it in there to where, and keeping guys on the move with a ball that keeps them running and they don't have to break stride. All of a sudden, if that is messed with just a tiny fraction, all of a sudden it's the difference between a complete pass and an incomplete pass. That's the obvious one. But all of a sudden a receiver has to slow down and he can't keep running, so he's tackled right away, as opposed to getting a lot of yards after the catch because he can keep moving. It's those little subtleties that I'm concerned about for Drew Brees.
Right. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. That obviously affects the Saints and fantasy relevant Saints. Let's start, though, with the quarterback waiver wire. If I had Drew Brees, where should I look to?
Well, first off, if I'm the Saints, I'd rather have a left-handed Drew Brees than a right-handed Teddy Bridgewater at this point.
Wow.
Oh, come on. Why are you throwing shade at Teddy? Come on.
It's not shade at Teddy. It's that's how good Drew Brees is.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I think it's going to be a struggle for them. I mean, look, these are the guys that are available 65% of leagues or less. The first guy I'd go look for, obviously, is Josh Allen. He's been very good through 2 games, really a game and a half. The first half against the Jets was a little bit of a struggle. Matthew Stafford has put up multiple touchdowns each of the first 2 games. Same thing with Andy Dalton. So those 3 guys. And then, Jacoby Brissett has really, handled himself well, stepping in for Andrew Luck. And the schedule gets a little bit nicer for them behind that offensive line. Brissett can make some plays as well. So those would be the 4 guys I'd go look for. Bridgewater would be an emergency situation. And let's not forget, we're also dealing with the situation in Pittsburgh. So you could look at maybe Mason Rudolph as another fantasy option as well. But those first 4 guys would be the first 4 I'd go look at. Josh Allen, number 1.
Hold it. Can I just follow up real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Because don't you think to some extent he's got Sean Payton, brilliant mind offensively. Still got Michael Thomas, still has Alvin Kamara, still has Ted again. Like, he still has some weapons to work with, and clearly there's going to be a drop-off. But I think looking at their schedule, now the first 2 weeks are brutal when he goes out there on the road against one of the toughest environments to play in Seattle, playing against maybe the best team in the NFC right now, the Dallas Cowboys. But once you get through that, your division all of a sudden, which we thought was going to be super tough, looks a lot lighter than it did with Carolina really imploding. Jacksonville's off to a rough start. Now, with Chicago, you're on your own on that one, Teddy. Just get rid of the ball quickly would be my suggestion. Arizona, I think it's manageable. I think.
Oh, he'll have some good games. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, Sean Payton and the weapons that he has. But let's not forget, as Pete Prisco alluded to, they're going to put Taysom Hill on the field probably in some more situations. They'll lean on Alvin Kamara in some more situations. It's not going to be, okay, Drew, you go out there and win the game. It's not going to be like that with Teddy Bridgewater. So there'll be some limitations on what he's going to do, and also the playing time. And let's not, let's keep in mind, if he struggles, then Taysom Hill may get some more reps and some more opportunities. So I just think if you're talking about fantasy-wise, comparing him to those other quarterbacks who are available, there are better options. To your point, though, he could still help them win some games.
Yeah.
And what about the other fantasy-relevant Saints? You keep saying they've got some legit weapons, right? But how does it affect them, running backs, wide receivers?
So I came out of the game yesterday with Michael Thomas getting 10 for 89 and feeling okay about that. Not that it's going to be the same level of production, obviously, as Danny was alluding to. The accuracy is not going to be the same. The way the teams are going to defend them are not going to be the same. So Michael Thomas goes from a potential top 5 receiver week in, week out to a 15 to 20 guy, and that's what I mean in terms of ranking. So you're still starting him. You're not getting away from him. But we've seen over the years, go back to 2017 when it was Jacoby Brissett starting for the Colts, T.Y. Hilton's numbers went in the tank. Every time Ben Roethlisberger has missed time, Antonio Brown's numbers went in the tank. Actually, Tom Brady throwing a touchdown to Antonio Brown over the weekend. First time somebody named Roethlisberger has not thrown a touchdown to Antonio Brown in his career. So backup quarterbacks clearly limit what the receiving corps does. You look at the rest of the guys here, Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith, Jared Cook. Cook is the only one that started across the board. He's borderline droppable now, just because, again, you're going to see a drop-off for a guy that has struggled through 2 games. The big name, though, from the other side of it is Alvin Kamara. So Thomas is still a starter. Kamara is still a starter. And I think you downgrade the production expectations. So he goes from a top 3 running back to closer to a top 10 guy. Yesterday was a bad indication of how things can go. Now, I do think the Rams' defense is obviously amazing. Seattle's run defense has been a little spotty through the first 2 weeks of the season. So I think you can still start Kamara. But this is going to be a kind of a discovery game, and hopefully he still is the leader of this offense because that's what he should be. Latavius Murray loses as well.
Why would Kamara be a downgrade? I would think maybe they'd want to run the offense even more through him like a Saquon Barkley in New York.
But you know that, and Danny knows that, and I know that, and there are very smart defense coordinators in the NFL that are going to say, we are going to make Teddy Bridgewater beat us, not Alvin Kamara beat us. And so he's going to see a lot of stacked line of scrimmages, a lot of 8-man in the box, and it's going to be tough for him to make those plays. Plus, the passes are different coming out of the backfield. Danny said it time and again. The accuracy from Drew Brees on those swing passes, those wheel routes, getting Kamara out in space, Bridgewater doesn't have that same touch. He might develop it, but we just haven't seen it yet.
All right, Danny, what have you seen from these quarterbacks? Jamie just threw a little shade on Teddy Bridgewater, but yesterday it was pretty ugly with Bridgewater in there, so much so that the broadcast was even mentioning maybe think about starting Taysom Hill. What are your thoughts here?
I think that's an overreaction today. Starts Taysom Hill. I covered him a lot in college. From what you've seen him so far this year, he's a gadget player. I mean, I almost felt like the Taysom Hill experiment had run its course.
But the gadget is so awesome.
Agreed, which is why I think, as Jamie alluded to, you will see a little bit more of Taysom Hill, even though I do think teams were starting to figure it out. Kind of like the Wildcat. It was awesome for a year, and then defenses started to specifically game plan for that. I would write off yesterday's performance for Teddy Bridgewater and just wipe it from my memory. That is a position to come into, not only for Teddy Bridgewater, but imagine being on that sideline, the distraction, the wind out of your sails that's taken when Drew Brees is leaving that field. And every player is over there looking around, oh my gosh, what's going on? How bad is it? And Drew Brees is over there like in pain, like trying to hold the football. All of a sudden, it's such an emotional, gut-wrenching loss for a team that had circled this game on their calendar the entire offseason. It was their revenge game from the no call last year in the NFC Championship game, and then they lose their Hall of Fame quarterback. I thought that absolutely just zapped them from any energy, any positivity, and I thought it showed with Teddy Bridgewater as well. So I would write that game off. I think there's also a reason Sean Payton talked Teddy Bridgewater into coming back with saying, hey, this could be your team. You could be the succession plan to Drew Brees. I think they have confidence in him, and if Sean Payton has that much confidence in him, I do too. Again, not going to be Drew Brees, but I think he's going to be a perfectly adequate to above adequate backup.
He better find out in terms of Payton, because that 5-year contract extension, this may be the guy that he's going to be tied to, because Brees isn't going to play much longer. 5 years out, we could be talking about Teddy Bridgewater, or maybe having to go into the draft and find a new quarterback, because this is now the discovery phase of Teddy Bridgewater as the successor of Drew Brees.
Right. Bridgewater could have gone to the Dolphins, been their starter instead.
You'd rather be the backup in
Right, that was probably a smarter decision, I think.
So, last word on this division. Pete Prisco says now he favors Atlanta. He said he did before the season. What say you, Jamie?
I think you have to. You know, it's a quarterback-driven league, and the quarterbacks in this division right now, you're seeing Brees gone, Cam struggling, Jameis still working his way through Bruce Arians' offense. Matt Ryan has been to a Super Bowl in recent years, 3 years ago. He's a former MVP, so he gets the edge right now, and I think that Falcons team looks the best, looks the safest.
Yeah. Danny, do you agree? They look pretty bad in week 1, though.
The Falcons?
Yeah.
They didn't look like world beaters for a lot of games. Matt Ryan still struggled with the football a little bit. They found a way to win the game, which is important, but I would still lean toward the former MVP over Teddy Bridgewater, who's coming back from, a massive leg injury, and there's some optimism around it, but I still need to see it over an extended amount of time. I will say this, just keep them above water. 4-2, if you could get that after 6 weeks, you'd be doing jumping jacks with the schedule they have coming up, and I think he can do it.
All right, you feel for the Saints, back-to-back years, heartbreak in the NFC title game now, heartbreak 2 games in as they lose their quarterback for an extended period. Our quarterback, Danny Cannell, and Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks, guys. All right, when we come back, even more reaction all day on CBS Sports HQ. Our fantasy guys take over for a full hour at noon, then a fresh hour of HQ at 1. Stick around. More HQ after this.